My daughter once looked at me with eyes that were far too heavy for her age and said, "Dad, you never gave me what I really needed." At first, I thought she was joking. I even forced a laugh, because how else do you answer something like that? But she didn't laugh. She just stared at me, waiting. Her silence felt heavier than the words themselves, like a door slamming shut between us. I'm Michael Rains. I'm 52 years old, and I've been called a lot of things in my life. Provider, worker, stubborn, even reliable. But that night, sitting across from my only daughter, Emily, I realized I had never been called the one thing I thought I was, a good father. Emily is 24 now. She's smart, independent, the kind of woman who doesn't need anyone's approval. She's got her mother's sharp wit and my dark hair, though she likes to say she got her backbone from surviving my silence. I gave her everything I thought she needed growing up. Piano lessons, braces, a used car on her 16th birthday, college tuition when I could barely keep the lights on, and yet here she was, telling me all of it meant nothing compared to what I'd kept locked away. That night, the words cut me open. You never gave me what I really needed. I sat there with my coffee cooling in my hand, looking at her across the table. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to remind her of everything I had sacrificed. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. My throat closed, and for once in my life I felt like a child again, speechless, small, and ashamed. You see, I grew up in a house where silence was survival. My father, Henry, believed that men worked, women stayed quiet, and kids were meant to be seen, not heard. My mother, God rest her soul, tried to soften the blows, sometimes literally, but there wasn't much softness in that house. When he spoke, we listened, and when he raised his hand, we braced for it. Talking wasn't an option. Feelings weren't allowed. So I learned to keep everything inside, and without even realizing it, I passed that curse along to Emily. When she was little, she'd crawl into my lap and ask, "Dad, what were you like when you were a boy?" I'd ruffle her hair, tell her to go play, and bury myself back in the newspaper. She thought she was asking for bedtime stories, but she was asking for something deeper, for pieces of me. And every time I turned away, I built another wall between us. Now, at 24, she wasn't asking anymore. She was telling me that I had failed her in the only way that mattered. The hardest part wasn't her words. It was realizing she was right. I had given her everything I thought mattered. Safety, stability, a chance to have the kind of life I never had, but I hadn't given her me, not the real me, not the boy who grew up hiding bruises, not the teenager who promised himself he'd never be like his father, not the man who spent years working nights just to pay for her dreams, only to miss out on watching them take shape. I thought I was sparing her from my pain. I thought I was protecting her by keeping the past buried. But what I was really doing was leaving her with a stranger for a father. That night, when she pushed her chair back and walked away, I knew something inside me had broken. I watched her leave, and I didn't chase after her. I just sat there, drowning in silence, the same silence I had carried my entire life. It wasn't until days later, when I was alone again in my little house, that the weight of her words really hit me. I opened an old photo album, one of the few I had kept from her childhood, and stared at the pictures of birthdays and Christmas mornings. She was smiling in every one, but the man beside her looked like he was always somewhere else. His smile was polite, practiced, his eyes tired. That man was me, and that's when it hit me. She didn't want my money, my sacrifices, or even my presence in the background. She wanted my story. She wanted to know who her father was, and that was the one thing I had never given her. My name is Michael Rains, and I live in a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of Dayton, Ohio. The kind of house you drive past without ever noticing. The gutters sag a little, the paint is chipped in spots, and the lawn only looks decent because the neighbor's kid mows it when I forget. Inside, it's quiet. Too quiet. I've been divorced for almost 10 years now. My ex-wife, Laura, lives across town. We don't talk much, except when it's about Emily. To be fair, she tried harder than I did to hold the family together. She wanted me to open up, to tell stories at the dinner table, to laugh more, to let Emily see that I was more than just a man with bills in his back pocket and grease on his hands. I couldn't give her that, and eventually she stopped asking. The silence in our marriage grew until it swallowed us whole. When I think back, I realize that silence has always been my companion. After work, I sit at my old oak kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Some nights I flip through the channels and leave the TV on just so the house doesn't feel empty. But even with the noise, there's a loneliness I can't shake. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of never really being known. Emily is the one person who has tried to break through that wall. She's 24 now, with her whole life ahead of her, but I still see the little girl who used to run through the yard with scraped knees and tangled hair. She doesn't live with me, but she visits sometimes, or she used to before things changed. I remember the last visit before she confronted me. She walked in carrying a box of takeout and dropped it on the table. "You'd starve if I didn't show up once in a while," she joked. Her smile was quick, but her eyes studied me, searching for something I couldn't name. "Don't worry about me, Em. I'm fine," I said, as I always do. "That's your favorite line," she shot back, sitting down and crossing her arms. "You're always fine. You've been fine my whole life. Doesn't it ever get exhausting?" I wanted to tell her the truth, that yes, it was exhausting, that some nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling with so many unsaid words clawing at my chest I could barely breathe. But instead I just smiled, opened the takeout box and changed the subject. The truth is, Emily is right. I've spent my whole life hiding behind, "I'm fine." I said it to her, to Laura, to my brother Daniel, even to my own mother before she passed. Daniel and I haven't spoken in years. The last real conversation we had ended with him slamming his fist on the table and shouting, "You think you're better than me just because you keep everything bottled up? At least I'm honest about being a mess." I never responded. I just walked out. Silence again. And then there was my mother. She used to beg me to share pieces of myself. "Michael, your daughter needs to know where she comes from," she said once when Emily was still a child. "Don't let history repeat itself. Don't be like your father." I promised her I'd do better. I lied. Looking back, I can see how Emily grew up in the shadow of that silence. She was surrounded by things but starved for stories. She had clothes, books, opportunities, but not the connection that comes when a father sits on the edge of the bed and tells his child what it was like to be 11 years old, or how he felt when he first fell in love, or why he works so hard. By the time she reached her teenage years, I had perfected the art of distance. When she asked questions, I brushed them off. When she tried to open conversations, I steered them away. I thought I was protecting her from my past, from the darkness that shaped me. What I didn't realize was that by shutting her out, I was teaching her that I didn't trust her with who I really was. Now, when I sit alone in this house, I think about all the times I could have told her something. Anything. How I got the scar on my hand from fixing a neighbor's car as a boy. How my mother used to hum old country songs while she cooked. How I promised myself at 16 I'd never raise a hand to my child. Those stories might have been messy, but they were real, and they were mine, and she wanted them. Instead, she got silence. So when she finally looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, you never gave me what I really needed," I knew she was right. And for the first time in my life, I had to face the truth. I wasn't just a man who provided. I was a man who hid. And the people I loved the most had been paying the price all along. The confrontation didn't happen with yelling or slammed doors. It happened quietly, like most of the biggest wounds do. Emily came by one evening, unannounced. I was in the living room, half dozing in front of the TV, when I heard her key turn in the lock. She still had one from when she lived here during college. "Dad?" she called out. "In here," I answered, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. She walked in carrying 2 paper bags, Chinese takeout again. She always did that, bringing food like it was an excuse to come see me. We sat at the table, eating in silence for a while. The kind of silence that used to feel normal to me, but now, with her grown and restless, felt like a weight pressing down. She poked at her lo mein, watching me more than she ate. Finally, she set her chopsticks down. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "Why don't you ever talk to me? Not about bills, not about work, not about surface stuff. I mean, really talk about you." I felt my chest tighten. I shrugged, took a sip of tea I didn't want. "There's not much to say." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not true, and you know it. You've lived 50 years before I even turned 24. You've seen things, felt things, lost things, and you've never told me any of it." I tried to joke. "You don't want to hear about an old man's boring life?" She didn't laugh. Her face was serious, her voice low but steady. "Yes, I do. That's exactly what I want." I put my fork down. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. "Emily, I gave you everything. I worked doubles so you could go to college. I skipped vacations so you'd never go without. I gave you stability, a roof, food." She cut me off, her voice sharp but breaking. "I didn't need another pair of shoes, Dad. I didn't need the extra electives or the car. I needed you." Her words hung in the air, slicing through all my defenses. For a second, I thought I might collapse right there at the table. I wanted to argue, to explain myself, to tell her I thought protecting her from my past was love. But when I opened my mouth, the words tangled in my throat. I looked at her, the frustration in her eyes, the hurt, and I couldn't find anything to say. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, her voice quieter now. "You never gave me what I really needed. You never gave me you." I froze. It felt like she had just placed a mirror in front of me, one I'd avoided for decades. I thought of my father then, Henry Raines, a man who never told me anything but orders, who never said, "I love you," never shared a single story about his own youth. I spent years resenting him for that silence. And now, here I was, watching my daughter say the same thing to me. The cycle had repeated. Emily shook her head slowly. "Do you even realize I don't know who you are?" "Not really. I know what you did for me. I don't know who you were before me. I don't know what scared you as a kid, what made you laugh, what broke your heart. I don't know my own father." She pushed her chair back and stood, could feel the distance between us widen with every step she took toward the door. "Em, wait," I finally managed, my voice rough. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. Her eyes softened, but there was still disappointment in them. "Dad, it's not too late, but it's close." And then she was gone. I sat at the table for hours after she left, staring at the half-eaten food. My mind kept circling back to her words. I don't know my own father. She was right, she didn't know me. Not the boy who hid under his bed during his father's drunken rages. Not the teenager who swore he'd break the cycle. Not the young man who fell in love too fast, married too young, and worked himself to the bone out of fear his family would end up hungry. She didn't know that every long shift, every tired smile, was me trying to be the opposite of Henry. But in trying not to be my father, I had become him in another way. He hid behind fists and silence. I hid behind work and silence. Different masks, same result. That night I went to bed but didn't sleep. Her words echoed like a hammer in my chest. "You never gave me what I really needed." I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Either stay in the comfort of silence and lose her completely, or finally step out of the shadows and give her the one thing I'd denied her for 24 years. My story. After Emily walked out that night, the silence in the house wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. I sat at the table long after the sound of her car faded from the street. The lo mein was cold, the tea untouched. For years, I had convinced myself that silence was safer, that not speaking meant not hurting, but now I saw it for what it was, a slow poison, one I had been passing down without meaning to. Her words wouldn't leave me. You never gave me what I really needed. It played over and over in my head, like a cruel mantra. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, thinking about all the nights I had chosen work, exhaustion, or quiet over connection. And for the first time, I admitted to myself that if I kept going like this, I'd lose her. Maybe not her presence, but her heart. And that was worse. The next morning, I pulled out an old box from the back of my closet. Inside was a stack of yellowed notebooks I'd collected over the years, pages half filled with grocery lists, phone numbers, reminders. None of them held anything real. I grabbed one, tore out the pages of scribbles, and sat down with a pen. At first, I didn't know where to begin. My life felt too big, too messy to fit into words. But then I remembered Emily's voice, how steady it had been when she said she didn't know me. So I started at the beginning, with the boy I once was. I wrote about my father, Henry, about the nights when I'd hide in the closet, clutching my little brother Daniel, while Dad's anger tore through the house. I wrote about the bruises, the fear, the shame of walking into school the next morning pretending everything was fine. I wrote about my mother, Anna, humming old country songs as she pressed a washcloth to my split lip, whispering, "You're stronger than him, Michael. Don't let him take you." I paused after that, staring at the ink on the page. My hand shook, but for the first time in decades I felt something shift inside me. I was finally saying the words out loud, even if it was only to paper. Over the next few days, writing became my obsession. I'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit at the kitchen table with my pen. I wrote about my first job at 16, how I stood in the back of a greasy auto shop, covered in oil, dreaming of a life bigger than the one I'd been handed. I wrote about meeting Laura, how I was 21 and thought love could fix everything. I wrote about the mistakes I made, the nights I stayed at work too long, the times I let exhaustion steal my temper, the moments I turned away from conversations because they scared me. And then I wrote about Emily, her first steps, her laugh that filled a room, the way she used to leave drawings on my nightstand just so I'd notice them before work. I admitted the guilt I carried for missing her school play, for being too tired to help with homework, for never telling her the one truth she deserved to hear every single day, that she was the reason I kept going. Sometimes I'd stop writing and just sit there, staring at the pen, tears blurring the words. My hands would shake so badly I had to set the notebook down. But then I'd pick it back up, because for the first time in my life, silence felt more dangerous than speaking. After a week, the notebook was filled, front to back, every page carrying pieces of me I'd never shared with anyone. It wasn't polished or perfect, but it was honest. For once, I hadn't hidden. I remember holding that notebook in my hands, staring at the messy ink smudges, the uneven lines, the parts where my handwriting broke mid-sentence because the memories were too heavy. I thought about keeping it, waiting until I was ready to face her in person. But then another fear struck me. What if I waited too long? What if the chance slipped away like it had with my brother, with my mother, with Laura? So I did something I never thought I'd do. I put the notebook in an envelope, addressed it to Emily, and walked it to the post office. My hands trembled as I slid it into the outgoing mail slot. I stood there for a moment, staring at it as if I might take it back. But then it was gone, swallowed into the system, on its way to her. Walking back to my car, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. Relief because I had finally broken the silence, finally given her something real. Terror because I had no idea how she would react. Would she hate me for waiting so long? Would she see it as too little, too late? That night, I sat by the phone, waiting. Every buzz made my heart lurch. But the call didn't come. Not yet. And as I lay in bed, the same thought kept circling in my mind. I had finally given my daughter my story. Now I had to find out if it was enough to bridge the gap I'd built all those years. The day Emily finally read my story, I knew something had changed. I didn't know it at first, of course. I only knew that I'd mailed the envelope, and every day afterward felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for either the ground to crumble or a rope to appear. I went to work, I came home, I cooked my dinners, but everything was background noise. The real weight pressed down every time my phone lit up. It was 3 days later when I saw her name flash across the screen. Emily Rains. My heart leapt so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I couldn't answer. My thumb hovered over the green button, but my chest locked up. I was terrified she'd say it was too late. Terrified she'd tell me she didn't want my story anymore. Terrified she'd sound just like Laura did the day she left, tired, resigned, done. So I let it ring. I sat there frozen, staring at the phone as her call went to voicemail. Seconds later, I saw the little notification, "Warn new voicemail." My hands shook as I put the phone to my ear. Her voice came through, soft and broken in a way I had never heard before. "Dad," she paused, and I heard her swallow hard. I got it. I read it." Her voice cracked, and I heard the sound of her trying to catch her breath. I cried for hours. I didn't know any of it. I didn't know about Grandpa or Grandma, or the nights you worked when you should have been sleeping. I didn't know you carried all that, and all this time, I thought you just didn't want me to know you. I closed my eyes, tears blurring everything. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Dad, it was everything I ever wanted. I just wish I could have heard it from you. In person. I wish you had trusted me with this sooner." There was a pause, just her breathing shaky on the other end. Then she said the words that hit me like a hammer. "But I'm proud of you. For finally telling me, thank you. I love you, Dad." The message ended, and I sat there in the dark, phone pressed against my ear long after the line went silent. My daughter had cried for me. For the boy I once was, for the man I had become, for the silence that stood between us all those years. She had wept for hours because of words I'd finally put on paper. And yet, when the chance came to answer her, to call her back, I couldn't. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed and the room fell quiet again. My chest felt heavy, my throat raw. I wanted to pick it up, dial her number, hear her voice live instead of through a recording. But fear chained me in place. What if I ruined it? What if, after giving her my story, I stumbled again and drove her farther away? I told myself I would call her tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'd find the words. Tomorrow, I'd be braver. But tomorrow came and went, and all I had was her voicemail, saved and replayed more times than I could count. Every time I pressed play, I heard her cry, heard her say she loved me, and every time the same thought pierced me. I had given her my story, but I still hadn't given her myself. That night, I sat at the table with the phone in front of me. I poured a glass of whiskey I didn't even want, staring at it as if the answer would rise from the amber liquid. I thought about my father, about how he never told me anything, never apologized, never gave me more than anger and silence. I had sworn I would be different. But in that moment, I wondered if I had only repeated the same mistake with different tools. Silence instead of fists. Absence instead of rage. And now my daughter was on the other side of that silence, reaching for me, while I sat paralyzed by fear. I pressed play one more time, listening to her voice break on the words, "I love you, Dad." My chest ached with longing. My hand hovered over the call button. I could almost hear her answering. Imagine the relief in her voice if I finally said something, anything. But I didn't. I let the phone rest on the table. I let the silence win again, even as tears ran down my face. And as I sat there alone, the truth hit me harder than ever. Sometimes the heaviest thing in the world isn't the words you say. It's the ones you leave unspoken. The voicemail has lived on my phone for weeks now. I keep it saved, tucked away like some fragile treasure I can't bring myself to touch too often. And yet, late at night, when the house is still and the weight of silence creeps in, I play it again. I listen to my daughter's voice crack under the weight of tears. I hear the words, "I love you, Dad." And every time my chest tightens until I can barely breathe. I gave her my story, but I didn't give her me. Not fully, not in the way she deserved. And that truth gnaws at me every single day. The strange thing is, writing my life down for her did something I never expected. It opened a wound, yes, but it also reminded me that wounds can heal if you stop hiding them. I thought telling my story would be the end of something, like unloading a burden onto paper and mailing it away. Instead, it feels like the beginning, like I finally cracked open a door I've kept bolted shut for 52 years. The question is whether I'll ever step through it. I think about my father often now. Henry was a man of fists and silence. He never gave me a single piece of himself, not a story, not a lesson, not even an apology. All I knew of him was fear. I swore to myself I would never be like him, but sitting here I realize I've been repeating the same cycle in a different disguise. My silence was softer than his, but it was silence all the same. And silence can wound just as deeply as violence. When I look back at Emily's childhood, I see it differently now. I see all the opportunities I had to connect with her. When she asked about my childhood, when she wanted stories at bedtime, when she begged me to come to her recitals. I see myself brushing her off, convincing myself that paying bills and working overtime were enough to prove my love. But love isn't proven in paychecks. It's proven in presence. And that's the lesson I've come to too late. What children want most isn't what you can buy for them. It's who you are when you're with them. It's the stories you tell, the memories you share, the time you give without conditions. I thought I was protecting Emily by keeping my pain buried. But pain that's buried doesn't disappear. It grows roots, and those roots spread into the next generation. She never asked for my trauma, she just wanted my truth. And I didn't give it to her until she had to demand it. Now, I sit with the knowledge that I mailed her my story but couldn't bring myself to call after she read it. I wonder if that voicemail will be the last bridge she ever tries to build, or if she'll wait for me to cross it. Sometimes, when I replay her message, I pause right before the words, "I love you, Dad." I imagine myself calling her back. Imagine the way she might answer. I picture her voice, tentative at first, then softening when she realizes it's me. I imagine telling her, "Emily, I'm sorry. I'm proud of you. I love you." 3 simple sentences, 3 sentences that could change everything. But then the fear creeps in again, fear that I'll stumble, that I'll say the wrong thing, that I'll lose the fragile connection we just rebuilt. Fear that silence is the only language I've ever truly known. I don't know if I'll ever find the courage to make that call. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, or maybe never. What I do know is that my story finally belongs to her, not just locked inside me. And maybe that's a start. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't wait until it's almost too late. Don't let silence become your legacy. Tell your children who you are. Tell them the messy parts, the painful parts, the parts you think they won't understand. Because one day they'll look at you and wonder if they really knew you. And if you haven't given them your story, the answer will be no. I don't want Emily's answer to be no anymore. So I sit here staring at the phone again. Her voicemail is still saved. Her number is still there, one press away. And I know the lesson better than I ever have. Love is not proven by what you provide, but by what you share of yourself. I just hope I can still learn to speak it. And that's my story. A story I should have told my daughter long before I ever put pen to paper. Maybe you've felt that same silence in your own family. The conversations left unsaid, the memories left unshared, the love you never spoke out loud. If you have, I hope this story reminds you of one thing. It's never too late to open your mouth, to share your truth, and to let the people you love know who you really are. Because at the end of the day, we don't remember the gifts, the money, or the sacrifices nearly as much as we remember the stories, the human pieces of one another that connect us, shape us, and stay with us long after we're gone. If this story touched you in some way, I'd love for you to let me know. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment down below. Tell me about a story you wish you had told, or one you're finally ready to tell. I promise, your words could be the thing someone else needs to hear today. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, raw, and honest, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. Every little click helps keep these stories alive, and it means the world to me. Thank you for listening. And maybe tonight, call the person you've been putting off calling. Share your story. You'll never regret giving someone the one thing they really need, you.